This is the 2025 Genesis G70, a delightful sporty sedan that could do with one particular little update, but otherwise blows BMW out of the water. G70 is Genesis' original sedan nameplate, and it came back in 2023 with a really handsome new model. Reintroduced for 2023 as this swoopy, round, strip-lit beauty, this thing makes no secret about how it guns for the Germans, and it does a properly good job of it. C-Class, A4, 3 Series, this is the more interesting path. Powered by a 3.3-liter twin-turbocharged V6, which is a bit of an oddity these days. This thing puts down 365 horsepower, 376 pound-feet of torque. It gets better too. You see, that isn't just your regular run-of-the-mill, arrives at 1800 peak torque boring nonsense that you get out of the modern Germans now. No, this torque arrives late. You get a proper swooshy boost. This is such a delight. It stays mellow in the low end. There's still plenty of pull, to be sure, and running through all-wheel drive, no matter which model you get, it's always able to put that power down. But get it up toward 5,000 and you just get this rush. It just pours out. Better still, switch it into sport mode where the throttle map gets even more aggressive and it just whooshes, even in the everyday casual cruising traffic. It just picks itself right up and goes. Managing that go? Well, this is actually properly sporty. They've got Michelin Pilot Sport 4S's on this unit. That is a serious tire. That is really the standard for performance tire, right on the way up to Porsches. Shy of the Cup 2 racing tire that you shouldn't really be using in the wet or in the cold on regular roads. That is it. And working in conjunction with that all-wheel drive, it makes it a really predictable car to really bury your foot in. I'm on wet tarmac today, so I'm playing it a little bit safe, but I still feel the confidence to actually pour into this thing. That pour, well, 4.5 second acceleration. That is pretty solid, especially when you realize that this thing's only 65K. That's no insignificant amount, of course, but that's not a lot by today's standards, and especially for something that can actually perform. Through twisty roads like this, the G70 is a soft riding but firmly planted pleasure. Take it on the autocross course and it's a shocking delight. It's a car that rides with the comforts of a larger car without actually having to be a particularly large car. It's not just power and an unusually characterful torque curve though. This thing is also just charming for being a little different. V6s, especially twin-turbo V6s, aren't really the norm anymore. It's part of why I like the Alfa Stelvio Quadrifoglio so much, and now as everything goes to either twin-scroll turbo 4s or twin-turbo hot V V8s, it's really something of an outlier. Now, it's not always straight bananas. The base model actually just comes with a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder that puts out 300 horse and 311 torque. That's still actually pretty substantial and actually pretty powerful for the class as well. But, of course, that isn't going to come with all that comes in this top-flight all-wheel drive 3.3 Sport model. The feature content for me in this model is, of course, the limited slip rear diff, but there's sensible stuff too. Answering both the sporty and the comfort driving, these higher trim, advanced, and sport models come with adaptive suspension. It's electronically controlled and it depends on your drive mode. This top model gets a head-up display and, like the G80, Genesis' really neat 12.3-inch digital cluster, which is one of the few digital clusters I actually enjoy for its clever, optional, you can turn it off, but really, really neat, layered display. This thing actually simulates a physical display with a sort of 3D effect that plays on the parallax between your eyes. You can just flatten it out if you don't want it, but I think this is one of the only interesting digital clusters I've seen. As I've said in basically every Hyundai, Kia, Genesis review in the last few years, the brands have been on a real push to offer as much value feature content as they can. It's good content too. Their driver assists, excellent. Their camera views, awesome. In these top models, you get the 360 cam as well as those excellent blind spot cameras that pop up in either the left or right instrument circle, depending on which signal you put on. The highway driving assist is standard, and it has excellent lane follow and adaptive cruise when you're out and about. It just really helps with the driver fatigue on the everyday commute. Here in the G70, even the base models get leather seating and ventilated seats up front, along with standard heated steering wheel and heated rears. This enormous sunroof, standard. These handy dandy seat side buttons that allow me to hypothetically crush the legs of my tall friends, or, move the seat back so that it's more comfortable for them to get into. That's standard too. Then we've got just the standard stuff, dual zone climate, wireless charging pad, and so on. Unfortunately though, wireless charging pad still doesn't mean wireless Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. That means that, well, yes, you can charge wirelessly, you still actually need to plug a wire in anyway in order to use that infotainment. And unfortunately, you're gonna want to, because the native infotainment is not particularly great. It was okay for a time, but it's really starting to show its age. It's rather simple and rudimentary, it's not especially quick, it's not especially feature-rich, and unfortunately, I don't even really see much of a point in having this screen up here in the first place. The display itself is fine, it's a 10.25-inch unit, but it's just a tablet stuck in there, and I know it has to be there because we have to have backup cameras in this modern age, but I really wish we just had smooth dash there, because this cabin is otherwise such a pleasant place to be. Genesis has done a good job on their interior styling, as you would imagine, seeing as they poached all the Germans from Mercedes and BMW. I would actually take the experience of this cabin over most of the current Mercedes-Benz line. It isn't perfect, of course. There are a lot of metallic colored plastics, including the paddle shifters here. They just feel meh. But then you've somehow got to manage costs if you're going to offer this thing from $65,500 or $54,500 if you're going for the base model. So features are one thing, but what about their function? Well, the seating, delightful. The bolsters in this thing actually puff up when you put it in sport mode, and it really hugs and supports you all about. You can adjust it too, you can ease it off if you don't quite want that, or if you need a little more space, but all around, these power front seats are really accommodating and just the right softness. This is a very pleasant bucket style seat. Now, in order to accommodate that stylish roofline, rear seating is a little bit reclined. Some passengers may not actually love that, feeling like they need to sit up to feel normal. If you've got rear passengers who need to sustain their slouch, that may be a little bit of a sticking point. With that being said, looking back there and really looking all around, visibility is quite good out of the G70. I've got to say in particular, despite it having a very sleek profile, this A-pillar is actually still upright enough that it doesn't stretch too long, too far, and obscure too much of your peripheral vision. That's really handy in town because it doesn't block out crosswalks in the way that a lot of others do. Noise isolation is quite good in here, except for when you put it in noisy mode with the adaptive exhaust that's on this sport model. Offsetting that noise somewhat in the sport model though is dual pane acoustic glass up front. You don't get it in the backs, those are still single pane, but you're not really noticing too much of the wind noise back there anyway. Boot space, commendable, you can get a fair bit in there, and if you fold these rear seats down, they do actually fold relatively flat. Audio continues to be a strong spot for Genesis, and the 15-speaker audio in this is especially enjoyable. I've been consistently pleased with how these things perform, and really the breadth and range of their reproduction. I just want to return to this powertrain again, because it's so fun! Oh my goodness, this is really interesting, particularly because it actually feels authentic. You can have noise pumped into the cabin. I've left that disabled because, honestly, it doesn't need any help. As you get into the top end, you particularly get this really satisfying turbo induction whoosh. Turbocharged engines are not generally heralded for having a particularly enjoyable soundtrack. If anything, it tends to sort of mute it. But it sucks in so much air and blows so much out that it actually really comes alive up top there. I'm hoping you can hear some of this, but without a full-on sound team, it will be tricky to actually capture the sound of this thing. Suffice it to say, though, that, man, it's a joy to handle at speed, and it's a joy to listen to under load. So then, the Germans, well, 3 Series looks like this. Mercedes all have really, really tacky, high-gloss, cheap-feeling plastic interiors. Audi exists, I guess. There is the Lexus IS, which I think is probably the sensible purchase in the segment, but really, this is just a pleasant place to be. And as I go through a personal moment of some cynicism about performance sedans, I'm really happy to be in this today. For Driving.ca, I'm Al Alder.